The House Transportation Infrastructure Committee will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Outman.
Here.
Representatives Alexander.
Here.
Cara.
Here.
Brock.
Present.
Kuntz.
Present and seated.
Nyer.
Here.
Preston.
Yep.
Bonak.
Here.
Frisbee.
Here.
Wertz. Hersberg.
Yes, I'm here, sorry.
Oh. Hersberg. Hope.
Here.
Colazar.
Here.
Andrews.
Here.
Grant. Here. Miller.
Here.
Wilson. Mr. Chair, you have 15 members present. You do have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair Alexander moves to adopt the minutes of the August 19th meeting. There being no objection, the minutes are adopted. First up, we're going to be hearing testimony on House Bill 4809. Representative Brian Posthumus, please come up and begin whenever you're ready, sir. Now, Brian, the people that you brought to testify, did they submit a card? Are you aware? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me, Chair Outman, members of the committee. Really appreciate it. We're here to testify on behalf of a very simple bill. Basically, it allows people that are managing international toll bridges, international bridges only, to enter into an agreement with the Secretary of State in Michigan to allow for electronic tracking on that, paying tolls electronically rather than building up a line at the toll booth stations and paying that way. So it's a safety concern, it's a efficiency concern, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken and Randy from Central Transport.
Members of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. My name is Ken Dobson. I am Vice President of the Ambassador Bridge Company, and I'm joined with Randy Spader, who is the Vice President of Operations at the Bridge Company. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share our perspective on House Bill 4809. As you know, the Ambassador Bridge is the busiest border crossing in North America. We process about 4,000 cars a day and 8,000 to 10,000 trucks a day. This bill is an important framework, working with the Secretary of State, that will allow us to introduce electronic tolling at the bridge. It would help us to allow and create a seamless travel experience for our customers, because it will reduce truck idling on the site. It will reduce trucks on the site, which also helps with safety. And we look forward to working with the Secretary of State to help identify, those who cross the border, so that we can send an invoice to. Simply put, this bill creates a balanced and a practical system that will help us as an international border crossing. And on behalf of the Ambassador Bridge Company, we look forward to working with the Secretary of State and you guys to get this passed. Thank you.
Excellent. Randy, did you have anything to add?
No, just to follow up, from an operations standpoint, very efficient, environmental friendly. Vehicles just don't have to stop and start again. There's a lot of benefits to allowing this bill to get passed.
Sure. Certainly. Pretty cut and dry. If you don't pay your tolls, you're not going to be registering your vehicle. Now, currently, you guys don't have electronic tolling. It is the traditional brick and mortar. You drive up, you pay your toll currently.
You got it.
Yeah, for commercial, we do have open road tolling, and we have had it for a while. The biggest issue that we have is just the responsibility of the people who create their tolls, is having them pay their bills is basically what it is. So in other tolling industries, there's some assistance from the Secretary of States that allow people to understand that the service is provided, a charge is provided, and that needs to be paid. So that's the assistance that allows us to bring that into our auto traffic, which currently is gated. So all the autos have to stop, pay their toll, wait for the gate to open and accelerate. So those efficiencies will continue at the Ambassador Bridge.
Sure.
And Chair, if you don't mind, I'll add two things that I'd like to add to that. One is the ability to enter into an agreement with the Secretary of State is what makes this more efficient, because that's what allows us to make it so we don't have to stop everybody at each crossing. So that's number one, the primary thing at play, and then also this brings us in line with any other state policy from around the country that has international bridges.
That was going to be one of my questions, Representative. As you were working on this legislation, is this common throughout other states? You know, utilizing their Department of State to help enforce their tolling of international crossings?
Yeah, this brings us in line with the rest of the country.
Excellent. We'll move on to member questions, starting with Representative Bruck.
First out of the chute, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. First question is, the Ambassador Bridge is the only privately owned international crossing, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So with Gordie Howe opening, that's not a privately owned bridge. How would they be doing their tolling? I know you're not from with that bridge authority, but how would they be enforcing those tolls?
So I would just touch just briefly, just from our perspective, you know, this bill helps us because it identifies us as international, international, and we're privately owned. So it benefits us that way. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to be doing their tolling, Representative.
Yeah, I don't, there's been no official of how they're going to do their toll that I'm aware of. I don't-
The bill itself applies to all international crossings in the state of Michigan. So the bill itself applies to all international crossings, whether they're privately owned, publicly owned, what have you. So whether or not the Gordie Howe Bridge would enter into an agreement is up to, I assume they probably would, but it would apply to them equally.
Yeah. Now, as far as out of state, is the Secretary of State going to be chasing down tolls for out of state license plates then?
That is something that we're going to be working with the Secretary of State with in operating more of an administrative agreement to determine, you know, if that needs to be done. I mean, I personally, you know, I personally think, you know, that's something we're going to have to work and figure out exactly how that process is going to be done.
And I don't mean necessarily sound critical on my questioning, but, you know, I own my own business. When I don't get paid for home care, the government has never helped me get as a matter of fact, they hinder me in some ways getting payment. And I'm certain landlords would be in the same boat. So why should the government help a private company get their tolls or get their funding, you know, that they're charging for a service? And I know it's a unique service. I do understand that. But why should the government, I guess you're asking for the government to help get tolls paid that don't get paid immediately. So that's kind of...
Rep, I'll take that because so when I first looked at this, I hadn't. That was my main issue with it initially, and as I continued to look at it, the number one thing for me is efficiency at the border. There's a reason why we're building another crossing to get from the United States, from Michigan into Canada and vice versa, right? It's because of congestion and backup. And so when we're talking about international commerce and we're talking about international transportation, efficiency is critically important. And so that's where this comes down to. It's an efficiency and safety issue, more, in my opinion, more so than it is anything else.
And will it cost the state any money? Is my last question. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was full.
I'll let the state talk to it, but in discussions, in initial discussions, I think there's a setup fee of $300,000 for initial setup and processing, but I'll let them speak directly to that. But as I read it, it was $300,000 initial setup fee. Yes.
I would certainly think there would be some implementation cost to the state. But just echoing Rep. Bruck, I had some similar thoughts when this legislation first came across my desk. But my thought process is we're talking about vital infrastructure, in my opinion, and we're talking about the tolls that are maintaining this vital infrastructure. So that's where I kind of separate the issues to a certain extent. But I certainly do, somewhat agree with what Representative Bruck was articulating there. We do have a question from Representative Frisbee.
Thank you, Chair. Just would cash or card options still be available, or would you be required to have a toll device in your car to cross the bridge?
As it stands right now, cash or card is still available to be used. As things start to progress, evaluating if the need is for that, because even as of today, a lot of manual toll collection is obsolete. Most people like the automated toll mechanism,
Right.
where they don't have to stop, pay. And people can register their accounts, so it would be charged to their credit cards, so their credit cards could be charged automatically. And then it would be more like an account balance that they would use.
So I've lived in Michigan all my life. I've never had a toll device. And I go to Illinois, Indiana all the time, and I use the cash or card option. I would hate to see that go away because there are people that do not want that device. And it shouldn't be a mandatory thing. They should be able to pay in cash or a card, whatever they choose. Thanks.
Representative Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for you, Mr. Chair. Is the Secretary of State going to testify today on this? Thank you. Easy Pass. I'm a bit out of my lane, pun intended. How does Easy Pass work? I also worked at a trucking company. We ran these out of state. Did the Secretary of State already? And if you'd like to defer that question to the Secretary of State, I'd be glad to ask them.
My understanding is Easy Pass is enforced by the home agency that the Easy Pass is registered with. So if I've registered with the state of New York and I have an Easy Pass account and there's an enforcement issue that needs to be done, if that state has an enforcement legislation to do so, and they have worked out an agreement with other states, then that's how that works. They partner, they come up with,
Right.
But I'm not sure if Michigan
I would-
has any type of
They must, because we'd get an Easy Pass bill, hey, your truck didn't pay this toll or something like that. And where I'm trying to find out is, have we already started this for tolling and now we're just going to do it for bridge crossing? I'm trying to find out, is this new or is this an expansion of existing? But let me retract that question. I'll ask the Secretary of State on that, if you don't mind. My question comes back on efficiency, and now it's open. Tolling's not the issue. Customs is the issue. Crossing the bridge, what holds us up is customs.
Correct. You're correct. Most of the holdups have to do with staffing on the federal level. However, efficiency and processing, once you pass Homeland Security, the more efficient we can be with electronic tolling, it improves the experience for travelers, especially if you are delayed during inspections. The last thing you want to do is wait in another line to actually pay.
Amen.
So, it actually enhances the process of electronic tolling. And as the representative mentioned, this brings us up to par with a lot of other states. I just drove from Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago, and I think once I got on the freeway, I didn't stop until I got off the exit in Toledo. So, this is something that's happening nationwide. As Randy mentioned, I think a lot of drivers like not having to pay, but you do need an option to pay in cash and things like that. So I think this brings us more up to speed where other states are. It improves the experience for our riders, and it's efficient.
Thank you both. Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, members, any other questions for Representative Posthumus and Ken and Randy? All right, seeing none, thank you all for your testimony. Much appreciated.
Thank you all for your time.
We'll go now to Aaron Shore from the Michigan Department of State. Wishing to speak, no position on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members. It's not often that I testify with no position, but I did want to answer some of the questions about how this looks from our department's angle. We have in the past been opposed to this legislation, as many of you know. and probably are never going to love the idea of enforcing registration holds against drivers, because that is something that's so important to Michigan residents to be able to use their vehicles. And as Representative Bruck alluded, we do see a policy decision here for the legislature in terms of whether to expend state resources, at least initially, to provide enforcement for a private tolling agency that is somewhat unique in terms of international infrastructure like this, but that's what we have in the state of Michigan. That said, we have had very serious and good conversations with the bridge company over the past, particularly the past year, to make sure that we get the appropriate customer safeguards in place so that if Michigan is going to enter this kind of tolling enforcement agreement, it operates well, that there's proper notice to drivers, that we make sure there's an appeals process in case somebody's car is stolen or something like that, and you can make clear that you are not operating a vehicle at that point. It's very clear to people what level you need to pay in order to be allowed to register your vehicle. We are still working through some of those last details and don't have the final version in front of you today, which is why I don't have a position at this point. But I do want to recognize the conversations we've been having and to say I think we're getting toward a point where if we're going to move forward, we will have the best version of this bill that we could have. I can speak a little bit to some of the questions that have come up so far. I can't speak on behalf of MDOT. I can tell you that in our conversations, but this was probably 2 years ago when we were having some of the work groups, at that point it was their intent to maintain a cash or credit option for the Gordie Howe Bridge. But again, that could have changed, and I would certainly want MDOT to speak to that. We do, as I'm aware and have been for a while, enter into those reciprocity agreements with other states. I know I've driven on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which is all electronic, and they will do toll by plate if you don't have a transponder, and I've gotten that bill, so I know we're sharing license information with at least some other jurisdictions already. There would certainly be a startup cost, and I don't have that in front of me today. I will look at that, but we will certainly need to invest in staff and in notices to customers and some of those things before the service fees that are alluded to in the bill would come in a way to pay for them. So there would be some upfront costs to the state. Yeah, I think that's what I have for you, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that I can.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Aaron. Rep. Kuntz, did Aaron's testimony satisfy your question?
Yep, just to clarify, so like through Easy Pass, the tolling 80/90, we do this now.
Yes,
We're just going to add international bridges.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And it does really work well if you could look into the Easy Pass or the iPass, but it saves you a little money too.
Well, I was happy to be out of the trucking business, so even better.
We'll go now to Representative Miller.
Thank you. I just need clarification. So if a driver racks up several tolls and then he sells the car and then the new driver tries to register it and he can't because these tolls are attached, tell me how that won't happen.
I would think I would need to think through what information there would be, and that might be something that we need to clarify within the operating agreement to make sure when someone is at the point of selling a car that they check that question, just like you would check for anything, unpaid taxes on a home or something like that.
Thank you, because it needs to be clarified. Thank you.
Representative Bruck.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. And I have a Turnpike PA pass myself and use it quite a bit when I'm traveling and understand how it works. But are there any other private infrastructures? Like I know there's some privately owned toll bridges in Saginaw. Is there any other situation where the Secretary of State gets involved? I know they don't get involved in drive-offs at gas stations and such, but I mean, is there anywhere else that the Secretary of State is helping someone collect dues?
Other than for other tolling agencies where we're participating, I'm not aware of something like that. We no longer participate in enforcement for unpaid parking tickets, for example. So it's only tolling that I'm aware of.
And that would be with other states, and then we would have to enter into some sort of collaborative reciprocity with others. I know we have it, like you're a Michigan driver, you get that ticket in the mail or
Right.
that charge in the mail. We're participating in that respect, but we would have to be billing 49 other states for not paying a toll. That would kind of come on you folks to do that then.
Or at least we would have the option to, and we could enter those data sharing agreements with each other.
And in the agreement, I know this is very, very at the beginning of the process, but as far as international or Canadian license plates, and then as far as the cost recovery, how would the Secretary of State pay for this service? Because it's going to take a lot of man hours or people hours and a lot of effort on your part to even implement it, but then to continually do it. Is there a cost structure that you're working on that the Ambassador Bridge would pay for then?
We haven't gotten to that point yet of determining exactly what the cost structure would look like. It's certainly envisioned in the bill that we could have something like that, because you're absolutely right. In talking to other states that have tolling agencies, I think it was Kentucky, for example, enforces 2 tolled bridges that are over the river between Ohio and Kentucky, and that's something like a $15 million a year enterprise for them. I mean, it's in Cincinnati. It's a busy crossing site. I think with the service fees that are in the bill, much of that would pass along to customers that are paying those late tolls, but it is a significant apparatus for the state to set up. But we would have some time, even if and when the bill becomes law. We still have to enter into an agreement with the operator about some of the finer points of how this works. That is one of the reasons that the bill calls for rule promulgation authority, because we do find it's fairly common in cases like this, especially when you're setting up a new infrastructure. We can't envision everything within the auspices of a statute, and there are some things where you wouldn't want to get into that level of detail. It's more appropriate within rules.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being, thank you again, Chair.
Representative Frisbee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question, and is there any things going on across the country where Easy Pass and others have a relationship directly with a private bridge entity, and the state doesn't need to be involved in it? Why would we, and it's just kind of following along with Rep. Bruck, why do we need to set up infrastructure to do this? Can't they do it, leave the state out of it, collect the tolls, pay the portions that go to maintain bridge, things like that? Why do we have to be in it?
I think that might be a better question for them than for me. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
All right. Members, any other questions for Erin while she's up here? All right. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Erin.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. All right. We're going to be moving on now to testimony on House Bill 4834 through 4835. Representative Greene. You have some riveting aeronautics reforms we'd love to talk about.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Much
And-
simpler than the previous piece of legislation, so thank you, Chair
Is
Outman.
this Brian from
Yes,
MDOT as
this
well?
is Brian Buds from MDOT, the
Excellent.
Aeronautical Division, and he will go through key specifics of the bill after I'm done with my little presentation.
Perfect. Begin
So-
whenever you're ready.
So thank you, Chair Outman. Thank you, Vice Chair Alexander, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in strong support of the riveting bills of 4834 and 4835, which updates and modernizes the Aeronautic Code of the state of Michigan. So Michigan's Aeronautics Code was first enacted in 1945, and in the decades since, aviation has changed dramatically. We have seen the rise of drone technology, new aircraft designs, and we have seen more advances in air mobility like vertiports and drone ports. Yet our statute still reflects a mid-20th century system, and this bill brings the Michigan law into the 21st century. So first, it improves clarity and consistency. The legislation streamlines outdated language and definition. It reduces confusion for regulators, operators, and innovators alike, and it provides a clear legal framework that ensures everyone in the industry understands the standards and expectations governing aviation in Michigan. So second, it supports the economic growth and innovation. By defining and providing a framework for drone ports and vertiports, Michigan positions itself then as a national leader in advanced air mobility. These provisions create certainty for innovators and businesses looking to invest here, while ensuring this technology integrates safety into our skies. And then third, of course, it improves fairness and sustainability. This bill updates aircraft registration fees and it streamlines licensing, ensuring that those who use and benefit from our aviation infrastructure contribute fairly and to its upkeep. At the same time, revenues will flow directly back into maintaining and improving aeronautical facilities across the state. So in short, this legislation ensures Michigan's aeronautics laws reflect today's technologies, today's safety standards, and tomorrow's opportunities. It balances public safety with innovation and economic development. For those reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to support and advance this important bill. And I will now have Brian Budds from MDOT's Aeronautics Division here to run through the specifics of the bill and also take additional questions. So thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for this opportunity.
Good afternoon, Chair Altman, members of the committee, and Representative Greene. Thank you for the support on this important legislation for us in the Aeronautics Division. My name is Brian Budds. I currently serve as Aeronautics Director within the Michigan Department of Transportation, which is a team of about 50 folks that do airport development work and also aviation safety regulatory functions within the state. So I highlighted a couple here that I'm just going to run through for you just for awareness. There are a couple, as you see throughout the bill, there's numerous terminology shifts just in terms of capitalization, naming convention, those sorts of things. So I won't highlight those, but did want to pick a couple just to share for awareness, and happy to answer any questions as we go through. So as Representative Greene mentioned, there's within page 3, there's a adding of a definition of uncrewed aircraft to aircraft. I think a lot of the functions we do within the Office of Aeronautics focuses on traditional aircraft, and as these new entrants come into the aviation system, we want to make sure that we're able to capture some of the activities that are occurring with uncrewed aerial systems. So that's one of the reasons that we wanted to include that. You also see on page 5, there's a clarification of a list of commercial activities. So this is MDOT wearing its licensing functions for airports, that if you as a citizen choose to partake in any aviation activity where there's a whole list there, our feeling is that should occur from a licensed facility. Our licensing process ensures the safety of those airports that are within the system. This is things like runway lighting and runway condition and runway length, things like that. Right now there's a situation where there's some skydiving activity that occurs at an airport that isn't licensed, and we want to make sure that skydiving is occurring from a safe licensed airport. So that's the mention there on page 5. Further down on page 5 and page 8, you see the definition of drone port and vertiport established within the Aeronautics Code. That is, as Representative Greene mentioned, our first step toward establishing licensing standards for drone ports and vertiports. As you may be aware, there's approximately 20 drone ports or vertiports that we have licensed within the state under a temporary process. It's challenging for us to operate without good licensing standards and good definition. It's challenging for the operators to operate in that environment too. So this will take the first step in putting licensing standards in place for that. Page 17, you see, removes police powers from our airport inspectors. We have not traditionally had our airport inspectors become MCOL certified law enforcement officers in some time. We rely heavily on our state police and our attorney general folks for enforcement of that. So that's clarification there. And then the last couple of items wanted to just highlight was the registration fee system change there. Currently, we operate on an annual registration fee where at the end of the year, we provide a renewal to all the aircraft owners. We would like to transition that into a 3-year process just to lighten the burden on an administrative standpoint from an aircraft owner to have to submit that documentation every year when generally it's not changing heavily. You'll also see language in there that modifies the rate in there a little bit. I just want to point out that that is just a call out of moving from the 1-year cycle to a 3-year cycle. So the effective rate over the 3-year period is the same. It's just adjusting that rate so that it's accurate for the 3 years. And then you'll see one other mention in the registration section that modifies the language that says we cannot, essentially cannot register under the state law an aircraft unless there is a valid federal aircraft registration. We're proposing to remove that just to eliminate an administrative hurdle we've seen with FAA and our federal counterparts being a bit slower on their aircraft registration, which puts our state aircraft registration in limbo when folks try to navigate the federal aircraft registration system, which occasionally can take some time. So those are the couple that I just wanted to highlight, and happy to answer any questions if you may have them.
Sure. Well, I'll start out, Brian. You kind of threw a lot at us there, but just in terms of some of the changes within our aeronautics industry in Michigan and what we can expect. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. But aside from that, what has been the task of the federal government in terms of regulating all this new emerging technology? Have they been kind of guiding states through this process, or is it pretty much the states are on their own and you have to come up with your own regulatory structure to deal with this? Are they kind of taking the reins in this, or not necessarily?
So in my perspective, the relationship between state and federal continues to follow the relationship that's existed for many years. And generally the concept is that FAA will control and regulate any aircraft that are operating in the air, while the state and local governments have regulatory authority over the placement of locations that you access that airspace. So that's where you see state licensing of aeronautical facilities, airports, etc. as a state level, and FAA is providing that general certification of aircraft when they're in the air.
Representative Frisbee, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Why is it a problem that a private entity providing parachute opportunities at a privately owned, why is that a problem for the government?
So the way the Aeronautics Code is written today, there's a listing of commercial activities, and the concept behind that is that if you as a citizen are going to partake in an aviation service, whether it's flight training, which is listed there, general aircraft charter, those sorts of things, our perspective is that those should occur from a licensed airport so that we have the ability to ensure that there are safe runway lengths, that there are no homes right off the end of the runway. And that's the type of issue that we see on some of these private airstrip commercial operation issues of perhaps there's a skydiving operation that is utilizing a private airstrip that doesn't meet any of the state licensing standards for an airport, and then continually is utilizing that aircraft or that service right above neighboring homes, which generally we wouldn't allow right next to a runway.
Okay. And then the removal of the federal registration, is there any effect on plane leaving Michigan airspace and going to other states' airspace or landing at other airports?
No, I think this actually removing, so all the language in here does is remove the requirement that we have to verify someone's federal registration. So, an individual aircraft owner still has the responsibility at the federal level to register their aircraft there. On the state level, it's been a challenge for our aircraft owners that have to register with us, because they get occasionally from the federal process say, hey, we have to review your documentation for 6, 7, 8 months, and then our state registration stays in limbo while they try to figure that out.
So it's not really a removal of it, it's just a change in process that they don't have to have it. They're still required if they're going to go.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Now, Brian, just to piggyback off of the first part of Representative Frisbee's question, these skydiving outfits that are operating out of these private unlicensed airports, is there ability or is there a path forward for these private airports to get that license to be able to continue operating their business?
Yeah, I think we would highly encourage anyone to go through our traditional licensing process for an airport that has 3 different categories that we, traditional airports or private airports, we continue to work with airports to meet the licensing standards. So that would be our attempt with any of these that fall in the category.
Is it a pretty burdensome process?
Not, in my humble opinion, in the lower ends of our aircraft our airport licensing system, no, it's really just some very core safety functions of not, I'm not trying to overblow it, but not having homes and that sort of thing right off the end of the runway.
Gotcha. We'll go now to Representative Kuntz.
Thank you for coming. I have several private airports in my district. What assurances do I have they don't have to close?
So if they are not conducting a commercial operation, they would have nothing to fear. It's really when you have that repeated commercial operation where they're offering services to the public that would become an issue.
But safety doesn't change. If I fly a plane and charge you, or if I fly a plane and don't, I'm struggling. This feels to me like you're getting involved in something. Do you have data that shows private airports are more unsafe? I mean, I've yet to read about this skydiving operation. Why do we need to get involved?
So I could provide you some data and happy to share that should you see fit. The concern for us is really that provision of services to the public. If you're on a private airstrip and you're conducting your own operations for yourself, totally acceptable. I think where we wear I will put on a safety hat from this perspective, that if you're offering services to the public and you come into a skydiving operation or any other type of aviation operation, my perspective is that if you get in that aircraft with somebody, it should be occurring from a facility that meets a certain level of licensing standards.
If you could show me data that private airports are more unsafe, I'd love to see that. Thank you.
Representative Alexander.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we're living in times that are changing quite fast. And I'm curious as to what's going to happen now in the agricultural realm of things. We've been using airplanes for seeding, herbicide applications, insecticide. And now we've got businesses that are operating with FAA licensing that are extremely portable, that we're picking up a drone and we're spraying either herbicide or insecticide over several acres, and then we're putting them back on the trailer, traveling 60 miles, not necessarily to an airport, and flying another field. How is that going to affect them?
Yeah, so my perspective on that is by establishing these drone port and vertiport definitions, it's going to initiate the rulemaking process. And I think we've started that process through JCAR, and obviously I think we use this as a public opportunity to solicit feedback on that. But I think from our perspective, as we go through rulemaking, we want to be very thoughtful about those more limited type of operations that are onesie, twosie here and there versus repeated, extensive things like package delivery that's continual in a certain location. We've always been very thoughtful on our approach to airports in general of looking at the actual impacts to those neighboring landowners around the facility, and I think we would apply that same logic for folks that are conducting their own operations.
Did that satisfy your question? Yeah. Perfect. Representative Wirtz.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's kind of a piggyback on that last question. So the definition of drone port means a fixed or mobile location for the housing, maintenance, fueling, and piloting of commercial fleets of drones and safe flying of drones. So if I were to launch a drone off of, say, a boat or off of a vehicle, off a tractor, is that all included in that?
Yeah, I think we'd have to run into that commercial definition language there too, whether that's providing service to the public or that's somebody operating for their own use. Again, there is no licensing standard yet. That's part of what we're talking about here. But I think we would go back to if it's someone operating for their own use from their own property, we wouldn't interject ourselves into it.
What if it's a business and their business is, like Rep. Alexander said, is spraying herbicides or pesticides from a drone, and so you're going from field to field and you're launching from that, or a case in which maybe you're doing bridge inspections and you're launching off of a boat, is the drone port then, is that all, I guess, covered in that, or does that need to be broader language is my question?
So I believe the language that's in definition that you just referenced would encompass both of those as drone ports. I think the added comment I'd add to that is, as we go through the rulemaking process, I believe we would put rules in place that would separate that limited use versus repetitive heavy use. There would be a bifurcation there.
Okay, and my second part then, vertiport means an area of land, an area of water, or a structure used for landing and takeoff of VTOL aircraft. So that is only, that does not include drones. That is actual aircraft, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Representative Brock.
Thank you again. And I had one question that I didn't, regarding farm services, is would farm services be a public use or commercial use? So it kind of piggybacks on both Coons and Alexander's question on a small private airport that's used for spraying, et cetera. Would they fall under this new regulation with their airport and potentially get closed down?
So is the question around drone port, vertiport?
No, strictly the fixed wing or manned aerial systems.
So if someone is so I don't want to parse. I don't want you to see that I'm parsing words here, but I think if it is a agricultural business that is going out to potentially a farmer down the street and saying, hey, I will provide you this service utilizing my aircraft, that should probably be occurring from a licensed facility. The flip side of that is if it is a farmer conducting those operations for his or her own farm, then probably not. It's really, it's that definition of commercial use that walks that tightrope.
So for instance, the farmer that they share services, and they've been flying over the same house for 85 years, now potentially would have to buy that home, that neighbor's home, destroy it, demolish it, in order to fit that new certification, possibly, potentially.
So only if they intended to land there. So if you are the farmer and you hire a service to come spray your crops, if they're not landing there, there's no need for any sort of licensure of that location, if that's what you're...
But no, I mean the little airport that is in all of our communities, when we're in the agricultural communities, that they're taking off, and they've been taking off over that home for decades and decades. And now if that commercial activity that they have spraying for all the other farmers in the region, they could potentially fall under this new guideline.
Potentially.
Okay. And then on UAS, beyond line of sight, I know there's a lot with Airspace Link there in Detroit, and you do mention, I believe it's mentioned somewhere about the they're at the central train station. They have they're doing beyond line of sight. They've been authorized by the FAA. Would this, you think, expand this ability?
So I think there's a couple different issues with beyond visual line of sight. I think the drone port and vertiport licensing issue really sets the stage for being thoughtful about where the actual takeoff and landing locations are, which is a little bit different than the beyond visual line of sight discussion, but certainly tie together. So I think this is a good step forward in making sure that those locations specifically are put in a good spot in terms of takeoff and landing. The beyond visual line of sight infrastructure that we've been supporting is a whole nother topic that happy to delve into, but there is, in our mind, some of the work that we've done on beyond visual line of sight, whether it's at Michigan Central or Traverse City, ties nicely into this of having clearly defined takeoff and landing areas.
Mm-hmm. Certainly would love to talk to you offline on that stuff. And then my one last question: if the state is registering a commercial flyer, but they're not yet registered with the FAA for UAS, does that potentially are we allowing them to fly prior to the FAA granting their licensure?
So we're talking aircraft registration?
Yes.
So as it exists today, we would not provide a state aircraft registration until someone can provide proof that they have an FAA registration. with this change, we would move forward with issuing someone a state aircraft registration regardless of their federal or other, international aircraft registration. And really it's not in any way an attestation of aircraft certification or airworthiness or anything. It's solely, our aircraft registration function is solely, is the aircraft here and is it at an airport that's licensed? It's not anything beyond, it's not anything aircraft capability wise, if that makes sense.
All right, thank you very, very much.
Now, I don't mean to beat a dead horse in terms of the agriculture spraying application, but I need to get some clarity here. So my understanding is a lot of these farmers, and they may have their own drones that perform this service, but a lot of times they hire this out third party. And it seems like these operators will pull up next to a farm field or an easement that's next to a field, and their drone is already on a trailer. They take off right from there, load it all up. So I need to get some clarity. So every field that they operate out of, they're going to have to be designated as a drone port, or what is going to be the situation there, Brian?
No, so the answer to the last part of that question would be no. I don't envision, if we're talking drones and drone port licensing, I wouldn't envision a farm field needing to meet any licensing requirement if they are going and spraying.
Because they are technically landing. They're landing on a trailer most of the time, like right next to the field.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity to make sure that the situation you're envisioning is not.
Yeah, we're
something
gonna have to do something there to finesse that situation, because that's just gonna be too overly broad for our ag community. So we'll talk about that. I just wanted to get some clarity on that.
Well, in some of this, we've already met with Representative Schutte in the rules that there will be rules that we're working with the Rules Committee on to further define this in the rules process.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you, Representative. We'll move on now to Representative Alexander. Do you have another question?
Yeah, I'm going to switch hats for a minute because I know we've talked about agriculture and potential amendment for that, but also previous in another life I was a drain commissioner, and I was responsible for 1,500 miles of drains, and would typically hire groups like Spicer or big engineering companies who went through the FAA licensing requirements, did all this schooling and got the licensures. But we would inspect drains from the air because we have so many miles that it was just the way to do it. But that would be a commercial situation. And typically in Sanilac County, you could be 60 or 70 miles from an airport. Is that something we could also think about an amendment or?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good opportunity for ongoing discussion here, but I think in those, of course, this is new technology for everybody, so I think we're all trying to wrap our head around it, but I don't envision low-use drone port, vertiports being something subject to licensing.
Okay.
And I think we just have to work on what that definition looks like.
Correct, and because we're just preparing also for repetitive, same location, multiple drones launching from the same location. So there is a definite difference between thousands of drones being launched and landing constantly from a particular location than just like the random inspection, you pulling up the side of farm field and doing that, because that's not going to happen in the same place frequently, multiple times a day, multiple days of a week. Does that make sense?
It will. In the term, we'll have to clarify deeper what a commercial unit is, because obviously Spicer Group and all these other engineering companies are absolutely commercial. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. We'll move on now to Representative Preston.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Brian, for being here today. How does this change the, the interaction between the Aeronautics Commission and your department?
So the Aeronautics Commission and the department are closely linked. The Aeronautics Commission serves essentially, for those that are familiar, like the state ad board for approving airport development contracts. So relationship with the Aeronautics Commission will remain. Really, this is just in terms of the drone portion of this discussion. It's, we've seen this evolution of aviation a couple times across the industry, and this is just taking the next step of being there to ensure those same type of safe operations that we would at an airport and a drone port.
And another question, a lot of the I think what are perceived as possibly private airports, could those be basic utility?
So
Airports that are, you know, I mean, they're basic minimums, very low regulatory burden. And how many of these commercial operations would be allowed to occur out of the basic utility status?
Yeah, so I'd have to double check the basic utility licensing standard. I believe there's some terminology about commercial operations in there as well. But to the first part of the question, yes, absolutely. Some of the private airstrips could transition to basic or
Or could they already be basic utility?
there are some privately owned public use airports that meet licensing standard. Generally, what we're talking about here are privately owned private use airports, which are a little different, but certainly would welcome them into the licensing status, which is generally not very restrictive. And then the added benefit that comes with that is once they become a licensed airport, they're afforded some tall structure protection around the airport to ensure safe ingress and egress out of the airport as well. So there is some benefit to being licensed as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. Members, any other questions for Brian and Representative while we're up here? No? Well, one last question. Just one final question here. And I understanding this is all new and emerging technology, but in your mind, what do you envision? What are we gearing up for in terms of this technology? Are we gearing up for unmanned, drone passenger transportation? Are we gearing up for? I mean, certainly we know Amazon is piloting these last mile delivery programs to some of their smaller packages. Just in terms of your work on this legislation, what do you guys envision?
Well, especially the Veriports, that is going to be like a taxi service, essentially, and transportation service, where it's an unmanned aircraft that is taking human beings from one place to another. And so we do need to have some freedom, and that any company is welcome to come and do business in Michigan. But we also want to make sure that as we're planning it out, it's planned appropriately, and put in places where it's needed and where the community also desires it as well.
And just to add to that, I think that's absolutely correct. I think probably 2 or 3 years ago we'd come before a committee like this and say, oh, hey, this is coming. I think the reality in Michigan today is that this is here in certain locations, and I think that's why it's so important to take this step. And I loosely alluded to some of the work at Michigan Central, Detroit, and Traverse City, and now with the University of Michigan, where there are actual beyond visual line of sights occurring from temporarily licensed drone ports and vertiports, and happily welcome any of you out to come take a look so you can see what's occurring as well.
Absolutely. Well, remarkable. This was a lot more interesting than I anticipated. So I thank you both for your time and look forward to continuing the conversation. So thank you. Representative Bruck moves to excuse absent members. There being no objection, the motion prevails. There being no further business before the committee stands adjourned.